Time travel is a pretty common trope in fiction, and today in this video I'd like to explore some of the philosophical ramifications that they tend to imply. And in this case, it will be centered around determinism versus free will, and the fact that most stories, at least all the ones I know, that feature time travel seem to support the deterministic uh, perspective rather than the one of free will. So let's start by defining a little bit what I'm talking about. There's a lot of different ways to exactly define determinism. There's like a lot of sub-branches and different domains. But in this case, I'm talking about what dictates our choices. Why do we make a specific decision? And so to simplify, let's say there's like two general polarities or two different competing opinions. On the one hand, you have determinism, where everything is just based on causality. And in this case, you could even say like materialistic determinism. So everything is just a succession of events where every event is dictated by the circumstances that came before it and the laws of physics. And there's the analogy of the billiard board where you just, I don't know what the verb you use, but you kick in a ball, and it affects all the other balls by colliding into them. Or you could also think of a domino chain where you set off the first domino and it's going to make all the other ones fall one after another in the sequence you created, you know, simply based on the only way it could have gone, based on the different rules of physics. And so that's a general idea. So, in our universe, it probably, for most people, it starts at the Big Bang. It's like the first cause, where we don't know exactly if anything happens before that, but that's the beginning. And then that sets into motion like a succession, a chain of reactions, and everything is basically predetermined because it can only happen a specific way depending on the circumstances, and everything is set in motion from the very start. And so, this also includes our decisions because we're taking a very I guess a strong stance on determinism and materialism. So all of our intuitions, all of our values, all of our reasoning is just neural reactions. It's just like chemistry inside our brain, and everything is just like it's also all this chain of circumstances creating reactions. And so with your specific brain, you were always going to be raised in the specific culture you were going to be raised in. Your genetics was going to create the specific way your brain works, and you were always going to have to be presented with the same circumstances, and within a certain circumstance, you would always make the same choice. Because all of these are predetermined by what happens beforehand. And so if you think about it in this kind of version, I guess there's like lesser version of determinism where it's a little weaker, but let's just use this strong version in the general idea, because I think that's what time travel seems to imply, and I'll get to this. So if we take this idea to its natural conclusions, it means that there's basically only one single way, based on the initial input, that the entire story of the universe can go, right? It's kind of like if you know a little bit about programming, it's like a pure function. You give it an input, and it's like just this automated process that will always give you the same output for the same input. So basically everything was set in stone based on the primordial input, including the laws of the universe or physics, etc. And then based on this initial input, everything was going to follow this exact same way. So in this way, you could think of the story, so to speak, of the universe or the history as just like in the same way as a movie. It's completely linear, and you could basically fast forward or go back, and it's always going to happen the exact same way because that's the only way it can happen. Now the opposite, right? Opposite theory, right, would be free will. And in this version, you can choose differently based on the same on the same choice, on the same circumstances. You could actually create you could break free from these circumstances and create a new option. How and why depends a little bit. To an extent, it's a little bit mysterious. In some ways, determinism is a simpler theory. It requires less unknown. And as I said, there's like different versions of all of this. But mostly that's kind of the two ideas I want to present in this video. And there's also this other idea of compatibilism versus incompatibilism. So compatibilism is a philosophical perspective according to which you can have both determinism and free will, like they can both coexist. Usually, that's not the perspective I would take. I'm more of a incompatibilist, but in this perspective, free will is kind of like reduced. It becomes weaker, where it's just you make a decision without coercion or force. Nobody's pointing a gun at your head. And so if you're taking a decision without external coercion, then that's free will. But technically you're still a slave to circumstances, and it's just like chain of events. So in my opinion, it's not a very interesting definition of free will, or that's not really the way we like to think about it, because free will, the way we usually think about it, implies agency. It also implies responsibility, right? Like we can change our destiny, so to speak, and therefore the responsibility for choices falls on us too, both in good and bad. There's a lot of concepts and ways of thinking that are interrelated, but let's stay focused on just time travel for this video. I can talk about the other nuances of this question and my specific stance on it in different videos. But if we take a look at most time travel stories, and there's like a different variations, and my main examples for this video will be 11/22/63 by Stephen King. And it's a story I'll keep it very simple and I won't spoil too much, but it's the story of a guy who finds basically a time travel portal in some location. And when he walks through it, he gets teleported to 4 years before his assassination of JFK, so in the 60s. And he basically goes on this quest to try and prevent JFK from being assassinated, believing that this will lead to a better world. And so, in the process of this story, he goes through the portals a couple of times, and every time he arrives in the same location, I think it's a butcher shop. It's been a few years since I read the book. Very good book, by the way. I would recommend it. It's got a good story, it's engaging, and it's got a good romance too. But anyway, back to the time travel in itself. Every time he arrives at the same location and the exact same events unfold, I think the butcher always says the exact same sentence, the exact same word for word. Everything happens exactly the same way. And then, so that kind of, usually you don't really pay attention to this kind of stuff, but this time I was like a little bit surprised, and then I started seeing this pattern more and more in time travel. But basically every time someone goes, because that's kind of a trope usually, with time travel, the person will sometimes do several trips, right? Or especially in the trope of the time loop, the protagonist will usually go through several loops. And because like something terrible happened in the present, and they're like, oh, I need to go back to the past to fix it. So they go back to the past, they try again, but they fail again, or a bit differently this time, and so they go back and back and back. And every time they go back, the only thing that changes is based on their action, right? Because now they have new knowledge because they've already gone through the loop several times. And so they change their decision and the way they act, but everybody else does exactly the same thing. As long as no one changes the parameters, every single other character will do exactly the same choices they did every single time in that new timeline, or in the, if you go back in the future, assuming you create a new timeline, or, well, I mean, there's different ways this can go, right? But you go back, everybody makes the exact same choice they did in the future. And so if you did believe in free will, or if that's the perspective you take, normally some people, even now, you could say there's like probability, right? It's like much more likely you'll choose a specific choice when presented. So let's say some very simple, stupid choice, but someone asks you to choose between vanilla or chocolate ice cream, and you like vanilla better. So odds are you're probably, if you were given the choice a lot of times, you'd probably overwhelmingly choose vanilla. But you never know. Maybe you, according to free will, given the same or the strong version of free will, at least, giving this specific input, you could come with different answer. And so you'd think that if you went back in the past and there was free will, a few people would make a different choice, right? And then it would start compounding because these people now give a new set of parameters, even if they're very slightly changed to other people. And so other people will make new choice. And over time, the more you stay in this new past, a lot of things are going to differ slowly but surely. And that never seems to happen in time travel. So it's kind of funny, well, or kind of interesting. Now, granted, this is mostly just like a glorified shower thought, but it seems that maybe even unwittingly, a lot of stories that talk about time travel seem to subscribe to the deterministic point of view, and I thought that was interesting. And there's a few other interesting thoughts I have, or kind of some implications that I find aren't talked a lot. Well, there's a lot of thinking around time travel in general, whether in philosophy or general culture, but these are a few ideas I didn't see mentioned a lot. Like, so there's the famous grandparent paradox, where basically if you go back in the future and you kill your grandparent, then you never existed, so you can have gone back in the future to kill your grandparent, and so it creates problems. And that's a famous one, and I actually checked it out to create this video, well, before I kind of made my outline, and there's like a lot more ideas and different considerations on time travel than I initially thought. But a few other things that peeve me a little, or that I feel are a little bit weird if you think about it a little bit more, is the people that aren't going and that know about the fact that the protagonist is going to go back in time, or someone is going back in time, are very chill about it, and like they know that it's going to happen. They tend to be okay with it, except if it goes against their plan, right? If they had the good present future they wanted, then they don't want the time traveler to go back. But otherwise, the other characters seem to be pretty chill with it. But technically, that means that their current consciousness is going to die. I mean, if you go back in the past, it's not the exact same person as you were. Now, assuming even with a deterministic idea, although maybe with a deterministic idea, it's still the same person, because it'll do exactly all the same choices, and maybe you're nothing more than just like this computation, this materialistic computation that doesn't really, you're just like an emergent property. There's no soul, or there's no thing like particular thing that differentiates you from some, from just this the exact same person that went through exactly the same story. But and it's the same idea with cloning. If you're cloned, like technically, is this the same person? I mean, it's a very similar person to you, but is this the same consciousness? So technically, even if people go back, and to an extent, usually when people go back to the past, it's to change the present. So this version of you currently is going to die. So now you're assuming that, maybe like the present is so terrible it's worth it, but like that's not really a question you see the characters wrestling too much with, when technically like they're kind of dying, even if they go back, even if the person going back makes the present future better. Like you'd think it'd be a bit more of a dilemma whether that's a good idea or not. And another thing I find is interesting, but people don't seem to, that's not like a popular way to think about it. There's this idea that when you go back in time to do, well, in the kind of moral calculus, right? It's like go back in the past to fix like some big evil. So the famous example is you go back in the past to kill Hitler before he had time to start World War II, and you save millions of people. But technically, there's a hidden cost that isn't often taken into account, except in the Infinity War Marvel movie, which I was surprised about. I'm not the biggest fan in general, but they did take that into account. But basically, if you go back in the future and make a big change, so in this case you kill Hitler, that's going to dramatically change a lot of things for a lot of people in that specific time, right? If Hitler dies, and assuming it stops World War II, the world is going to be pretty different. And that means all the people that were born after the specific change you made aren't going to be born anymore, right? Because if you think about it, the odds of you existing are very low, even if your parents meet, nonetheless, which they might not with this big shift in the past. Like if they don't procreate at the exact same moment, it might not be the same combination of genes that come together and forms you. So they might create, might have a child with the same parents, but it probably won't be you. So technically, if you go back in the past and you fix a big wrong, you're also killing every single person that's existed, that was born in between then and now, or from the point where you came back. Now, technically, you're going to create a new set of people, because now in this new reality, a lot of people are going to have children, and these people didn't exist before. So you're replacing a lot of people by new people. But I still think that's like a big moral implication that's not really talked about that much. Like, is it worth it? Like, if you count, maybe you're killing more people than you're saving. I mean, it's like, it's weird. So anyways, these are just a few a few shower thoughts on time travel and a few implications that don't seem to be talked a lot about. All right, that's it for this video. With a little bit of a, shower thought, and a bit outside of the core of my general message and ideas, but I hope it was still interesting and entertaining. And see you in the next video. Bye.